Welcome to As We Get Older. I'm Laura Orndeff, and with me I have my, of many years, wonderful friend, Dr. David Moore.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hi.
And your specialty is?
I am board certified in psychiatry and neurology. I practice as a psychiatrist mostly.
Okay. But you spent decades in a hospital.
I have. I've worked in many hospitals, yes.
So this is part of the series of just general random questions about a hospital. For those of you who've never been around medical folks, you've never worked in the medical field, and some of the stuff when you're around a hospital, you're like, this makes no sense. So I'm going to be the person asking the questions, and David is going to be answering
Okay.
with wisdom.
All
So
right.
the first one, David, I'm supposed to have surgery tomorrow, and the doctor told me I'm not supposed to eat anything, and they are being so picky because I know my body. I'm just going to have a little Sprite, a few little egg whites. It's no big deal. I've got a strong stomach, and whatever this NPO thing is, and that's just nonsense. They don't need to tell me I don't need food.
Well, unfortunately, that NPO thing is a real thing. Now, it comes into play both like in surgery, but it also can come into play on various lab or radiology tests where they need you to have an empty stomach or not have eaten for a certain number of hours because they're testing something. And oftentimes that comes into play like with diabetic tests. But here's the most important reason why to be NPO. Again, NPO is nothing by mouth, though the P part's written in Latin. I can't tell you what that means at the exact moment. I'll have to look it up. But essentially, nothing by mouth. And the reason for it is especially if you're going to be getting any kind of anesthesia, one of the biggest risks with anesthesia is aspiration. Aspiration means something comes up from your stomach area, and instead of coming out your mouth like you would think if someone is vomiting, aspiration will come up and then go into your lungs. That can be fatal, it can be deadly, it can lead to pneumonia, it can lead to all kinds of horrible things. So that little bit of Sprite may have tasted really well and really good at 6 o'clock in the morning when your throat is all dry. But if you're having surgery an hour or two later, that little bit of Sprite can lead to serious respiratory issues once you're under anesthesia.
And even if you are on the OR table, the operating room table, and it starts to happen, it is so quick that
Right.
it's not something they can
It's
fix.
nothing that they can. If it happens, it happens. I mean, of course, they're going to try to do everything they can to minimize the damage and the risk. But once you've got that in your lungs, it's very hard to get out.
So that's why sometimes if you're in the emergency room and the questions will say, how long has it been since you've had anything to eat or drink? And you're like, I'm here for sprained wrist. But there is like standard questions they're looking for if you have to go into surgery.
Correct.
And it's usually about 8 hours.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
usually about 8 hours. And so don't just go, oh, well, we stopped at, a fast food restaurant on the way over here. Yeah, it's been 5 hours.
And those are important questions also if they're trying to determine if you've got any kind of diabetic condition of when you ate last. Because if they're checking your sugar and your sugar is 100, but you ate 5 hours ago, that's very different than if your sugar is 100 and you just ate 2 minutes ago. So they need that information as well.
So that's where you also want to be truthful if you're in the hospital and you're hungry and they're running a whole bunch of tests for whatever reason and lunch is not until 12, but your wonderful neighbor brought you a homemade cinnamon roll. And the nurse said don't do it and you're like it's no big deal, I'm starving.
Well, just don't do it. And here's the other reason. You don't want to have repeat all these tests twice. You don't want your surgery delayed an extra day because you did eat. And so all of that only will make you have to stay there longer.
Correct. And again, you also want to be truthful with the nurses.
Sure.
Don't go with the attitude of, I'll tell them what they need to know. No, no, no. They're asking you because they need to know that. You want to
Absolutely.
be truthful. If, someone, because a lot of times people can, eat a little food here or there. That's not a problem. But you want to be honest and ask the questions, can you do it?
Sure, absolutely.
Now, the next question I have is, my friend, I was in the car and I got a phone call because, hands free, so I could do that. And my best friend's daughter called and said my best friend was in the hospital. And, my best friend said, hey, can you call me? I don't have my cell phone, but can you call me on the hospital landline? So I, have the phone automatically call the hospital. But when I called, the operator said there was no such person at the hospital. And I'm like, well, I know my friend wouldn't, she's a smart person. She would have told me the right hospital. Why would the hospital say they have no information about my friend?
So, obviously, to everyone, health privacy is a huge concern. And back during the Bush administration, a thing was put in place called HIPAA. And probably many people have heard of HIPAA, not quite understood what it is. But essentially, it's a whole lot of rules and regulations that help protect your healthcare information and keep it as private as possible. So, how that could come out to play in your situation is when someone checks into a hospital, they're going to ask them the level of privacy that they would want. And one of those levels is absolutely zero information going out, even if you're just in the hospital, even if you're just admitted there. You want none of that information going out. And in that case, if someone calls, the hospital is going to say, we don't know who that person is. We don't have any record of that person being here. But that's because that person, when they went into the hospital, requested that.
So it's not a situation as, oh, well, don't tell most of my friends, but you can tell these 3 or 4 friends.
Right, right. It's got to be kind of one policy. Most people would probably pick a policy where if someone called or wanted to send flowers, the hospital would say, okay, they're in room 212 or whatever it is. And that's what most people would pick. That doesn't mean they're releasing your condition. That just means they're letting the person know you're there and that whatever room you're in. It's not letting the person know if you're stable or not. It's not telling them the diagnosis or the treatment. And that's probably what most people would pick.
But also, because you did mention about flowers, if you have selected no information, the florists are told you're not there.
That's correct.
So you've been talking to your friend on their cell phone and you've ordered some flowers. They're going back to the florist.
You're not getting them.
You're not getting
Or
them.
the chocolate.
I know. But you don't need this for this test.
Well, that's true. It depends on what you're there for. Maybe you shouldn't have the chocolate.
So what if you're in the hospital and you love your family. You love everybody in your social circle, your spiritual circle, whatever. But every time you nod off and you open your eyes, boom, there are 3 people at the foot of your bed. And you're just like, but you don't have the heart to tell them no because they mean well. They're bringing you stuff they want, and they're a great support system. But is there someone you could talk to?
I have always said that the hospital is no place for sick people because you cannot get any rest there to recover. And that can be because there's bells and whistles going off at all times of day and night. Nurses are coming in, doctors are coming in, but it can also be your family and friends who are coming in. A lot of hospitals used to have very strict visiting hours. Those have really become relaxed in a lot of places, and so friends and family can just drop by whenever they want. And honestly, it's okay to tell them no. You don't need your whole church coming by or your bridge club or your golf team. They don't all have to come by and let you know how you're doing. Because part of being in the hospital is about resting, which is about recovering. And so you cannot be afraid to say, hey, when I'm out of here next week, I'll give you a call. But for right now, leave me alone. Or you may need your spouse or family member to tell other people that if the person who's ill doesn't have that ability.
And if they don't have the ability, talk to your nurse, because not your nurse, your doctor, the CNA, again, just mention it to them and they will be diligent for you.
Yes.
Because their whole focus is you.
Right.
You're the patient. Everybody else is secondary. They do take care of everybody else. But if this is what the patient wants, they will fight for it.
And sometimes the doctors and nurses will make the suggestion to the patient or their immediate family of, we need to limit these visitors because they're being just too disruptive in some way.
Mm-hmm. And it's also fair if you are the patient and or if you're caring for someone who is older and you do have, let's say, somebody from your social circle, your church, your bridge club, or golf club, and they're there. Sometimes, unfortunately, some providers will walk in and start giving a diagnosis or start talking. It's okay to say, oh, excuse me, and just kind of somehow mention to them that not everybody should be hearing this.
That's true. Yeah, and it probably, honestly, doctors should be clearing the room and just talking to you or those that you designate about whatever the diagnosis or health condition is. But that's not that. In reality, that's great, but that's not really what doctors do. Doctors are there. They walk in the room and they immediately just start talking.
Right. And it's also, it's your right, and we've talked about in another video, if the doctor comes in, let's say David comes in and says, okay, everybody, out of the room, politely, out of the room, it's my right to say, no, I want this person to stay here.
Correct.
And that's fine because that's a support person.
Correct.
But they're basically giving you that out to say, hey, I'll take care of the situation, everybody out.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Now, again, random questions. So I'm in the hospital and I've had surgery. I've been in bed for a while. I'm just tired. I'm just tired. And everybody, it seems, who walks in the door wants me to get up and move. And I'm trying. I really am trying. I'm not trying to be lazy. I'm really trying. I'm just so tired of, can they not come in and say hi without asking me to move? Why do they want me to keep moving?
Well, there are two big things that can happen in hospitals or any kind of setting where someone is lying in bed for any long-term illness or recovery period. And those two things are very serious. One is blood clots. If someone is lying motionless or they're not really moving, it's very easy for blood clots to form, and blood clots can be fatal. So one of the reasons they're asking you to keep moving is to keep blood clots from forming. The other thing is lung capacity, especially as you get older. And if you're not up and moving around and not only breathing in and out, but physically moving your torso, your lungs will start to have reduced capacity to breathe. And that's not a good thing because we all need to breathe, but pneumonia, it helps pneumonia set in. It can start in the lower lobes because they're just kind of sitting there. They're not getting the full intake and exhalation when you're breathing. And so pneumonia and blood clots are the big reason why people have to keep moving when they're in the hospital.
Okay. Now, I'm going to ask a question as a non-medical person. You're a doctor, so if you could speak non-medical person. We've all heard of pneumonia. What is pneumonia?
All right, well, so pneumonia is a lung infection. And so it's basically when bacteria or fluid builds up and starts to fill lung tissue. And so it can be bacterial in origin. In other words, a bacteria caused it, of which case you're going to get antibiotics, and depending on the severity of it, those might be IV antibiotics. But pneumonia can also form if for instance, in chronic congestive heart failure, where your body's not moving the fluid through your body like it should. A lot of people will get swollen legs when that happens. But think of that fluid's also going through your lungs, and if your heart is not able to pump, fluid starts to pool in your lungs. Same thing with inactivity. Like what we just talked about with the need to keep moving. And so that's not a bacterial origin of pneumonia, but that's still pneumonia nonetheless. And that's much harder to get rid of because antibiotics aren't going to fix that kind of pneumonia. And it's going to take time and more just supportive care. Supportive care meaning IVs to keep you hydrated, those kind of things is what I mean by supportive care.
Okay. So this is just one of the videos we have on just random hospital questions. And so thank you, David, for helping me out on this. Again, if you have any questions, ask your medical team, your doctor, the people in the hospital. I mean, that's what they love. I mean, because you've been there. They really, I've seen their faces kind of light up when you engage in conversation. It's like, oh, you're listening, you're paying attention. Yes, let me answer. I've seen, I know with Dad, I've seen doctors, they've actually put their stuff down and like, sure, let's talk. And so they want to answer.
And there can always be jerks. Jerks exist in every field, and I'm sure there's a few doctors who are jerks and a few other specialties. Don't give up if the first person you come to is abrupt. There's other people there that can answer your questions and would be happy to.
Right. So, again, ask questions, but hopefully we've given you a few things to think about. If you have more questions, on my website, there's a place where you can contact me. Please send me more questions because we can get these answers.
Sure,
so,
absolutely.
Great. So, David, thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Check out my library and see you in the next video.